Hey NFL fans, if you plan on betting on NFL games this year, or if you do fantasy football or daily fantasy football, then you should definitely at least be aware of how biorhythms might affect the outcome of each player and ultimately each team on a given week. I have just released an app that does all of the busy work for an entire season when it comes to biorhythms, specifically the 2023 NFL season. And it costs $5.99 and it is currently only available for iPhone users. Man, I know all the scientists out there, anybody who bets on games seriously, already knows about fantasy football or already knows about biorhythms. And for you guys, this is going to save you so much time. And for the majority of people out there who are like, oh, I don't even know what biorhythms are, well, these are biorhythms. And it can kind of accurately predict whether somebody's going to have a really good day or a really bad day in three regards: physical, emotional, and intellectual. The theory of biorhythms says that people tend to have good days versus bad days because of three physiological cycles that everyone follows: the physical cycle, which lasts 23 days, the emotional cycle, which lasts 28 days, and the intellectual cycle, which lasts 33 days. Currently, in all the medical schools in the US, biorhythms are mentioned in the medical school textbooks and said to have a medium to medium-low correlation to how a person actually performs on any given day. There are three main functions in my biorhythm app. The first is comparing two players to each other. The second function is to save my entire fantasy team so I can look up how each player is going to do week at a time with all my data nice and compact for me. And the third thing that this app does is it helps you bet on individual NFL games by compiling all the fantasy football players' data for the team for the specific weekday, or game week, I mean. Wow, look at that. So the original purpose of this app was to help with season-long fantasy football decisions, primarily to help me make those decisions. See, a couple years ago, I was in a 10 or 12 person fantasy football league, and one of my players went down, and I was trying to choose between two players off the waiver wire. And it seemed to me like both of these players were pretty much of equal value, to me at least. And so I looked up the biorhythms, and sure enough, one of them had all three biorhythms were super favorable, especially the physical one. And the other player had, weak or poor biorhythms overall. And so I went with the stronger player. It obviously worked out, and everything was great, except that the problem was for me to look up the data for just these two players. Like, it was such a pain in the butt that it bothered me that there wasn't already an app that would just let me go click, click, click and just look at the data real quick, see if it's useful, see if I can use it in my decisions or not. And so that's why I originally started to make this app. It now seems obvious to me that anybody who is a daily fantasy football player should absolutely be using this app. So much. I'm excited to be using this app for betting on sports since I live in Michigan. personally, since I live in Michigan and betting on sports is legal now, I'm really excited to be using this app for the NFL season. I'm releasing it in the middle of week 1, and I think what I'm going to do here, we just saw the first game in the books, but I think and by the way, the data, Jared Goff had an absolutely shitty day. So did fucking Marvin Jones Jr. Oh my gosh. It was like drop ball after drop ball after drop ball. It was just terrible. So I feel like the data did actually line up pretty well. And for the record, the Kansas City Chiefs should have definitely won that game. Not to mention they were without their best defensive lineman, and they were without their tight end too, Travis Kelce, I think his name is. But yeah, look, it was just abysmal with Jared Goff, which is why we ended up having to run it all day long. But yeah, so I'm excited because what I'm going to do is I'm going to pay attention to the sports shows for Sunday, and I'm going to take all the picks that people have for betting against the line and stuff, whatever the spread is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to preview those games in the app, and instead of betting on, let's say they give advice for 8 games, I'm going to look through all 8 games, and I'm going to find the 3 or 4 or 5 games where the data is also favorable. So like if they were to say, the Packers are going to cover, and I look at the data and the Packers are also have super high biorhythms, especially the quarterback, especially the running back and the wide receiver, but the quarterback primarily. It's like I'm going to use this app, so it'll be like oh, they want the Packers to cover and they have really good data. Well, then okay, sure. Then I also agree. I'm going to bet the Packers to cover. You see what I mean? But yeah, so that's kind of how I'm going to be using it for week 1. Not to mention the prop bets. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen any prop bets yet, but prop bets are so huge because you just obviously go to one player, look up and find whatever running back. And it's like, oh, will Christian McCaffrey have 100 yards? Yes or no for week 1? And it's like, okay, well, probably not. With that shitty ass biorhythms. So that's kind of how I plan on using it for right now, at least, since I don't really do fantasy football anymore. If you'd like to learn more, there is another explanatory video in the App Store. Just search for NFL Biorhythm Tool. But once you purchase the app, there are links to both the videos in the app, as well as specific and detailed explanations on how to use this app and the theory of biorhythms and the equations to the theories, etc., 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 etc. It's only $5.99 in the Apple Marketplace. The Android version is coming soon, probably before week 3 of 2023. And once again, this is the entire 2023 NFL season. All of the biorhythms for all of the players on every team for every week at the touch of your screen, click, without having to look anything up, all for only $5.99 in the Apple Marketplace store. Go Lions.